Jimi Hendrix was mid-song when local guitarists shouted, "Challenge!" His response is still talked about today. March 1967, London. The Bag O' Nails Club on Kingly Street was packed with about 200 people, wall to wall, smoke hanging thick in the air like a physical presence. The club was tiny, barely bigger than a large living room, with a stage that was more like a raised platform shoved against the back wall. The ceiling was low, stained with decades of cigarette smoke. The sound system was mediocre at best, but none of that mattered. The Jimi Hendrix Experience had been tearing up the London club scene for 5 months, and word was spreading like wildfire through the city's tight-knit music community. Every guitarist in London wanted to see this American who was supposedly redefining what the instrument could do. Eric Clapton had been coming regularly. Jeff Beck stopped by whenever he could. Even Pete Townshend showed up occasionally, standing in the back, studying Jimi's technique. Tonight the crowd included session musicians, music journalists, guitar shop owners, and hardcore blues fans who'd heard the rumors. Everyone was pressed together, drinks held high, all eyes locked on the stage. Jimi was halfway through Red House, his fingers sliding up and down the neck of his white Stratocaster, bending notes in ways that made other guitarists shake their heads in disbelief. The song was a slow blues, but Jimi was making that Strat cry, scream, and moan like a living thing. The crowd was mesmerized, standing perfectly still, afraid to even breathe too loud and miss a note. That's when someone shouted from the back of the club, "I can play that!"
The voice cut through the music, loud and aggressive. Heads turned. Jimi kept playing, but you could see his eyes flick toward the back of the room, acknowledging he'd heard it. The voice shouted again, louder this time. "I said I can play that, better than you." Now the whole club was looking. At the back, near the bar, stood a young white guy in his early 20s, holding a beer, swaying slightly. He was drunk, clearly, but not falling down drunk. Drunk enough to be bold, sober enough to mean what he was saying. Jimi stopped playing. The sudden silence was jarring. Noel and Mitch stopped too, confused, looking at Jimi for guidance. "You say something, mate?" Jimi asked into the microphone, his voice calm, almost friendly. "Yeah, I said something," the guy shouted back. "I can play that blues better than you. I'm a guitarist too. I've been playing since I was 6 years old. You're good, but you're not that special." The crowd murmured. Some people looked angry. How dare this drunk interrupt Jimi Hendrix? Others looked curious. Was this guy serious? Did he really think he could challenge Jimi? In the corner, Eric Clapton, who'd come to watch Jimi play, leaned forward with interest. This was about to get interesting. Jimi looked at the heckler for a long moment. The smart move would be to ignore him, have security remove him, continue the show. That's what most professional musicians would do. But Jimi wasn't most musicians.
"What's your name?" Jimi asked. "Danny Morrison," the guy shouted back. "And I've been playing guitar in this city since before you even got here." "All right, Danny Morrison," Jimi said, his voice still calm, still friendly. "You want to play? Come on up here." The crowd gasped. Was Jimi serious? Was he really going to let this drunk heckler on stage? Danny looked shocked too, but he wasn't backing down. He handed his beer to someone, pushed through the crowd, and made his way to the stage. Someone handed him a guitar, a red Gibson Les Paul that belonged to the club. Danny plugged in, adjusted the strap, and looked at Jimi with confidence bordering on arrogance. "What are we playing?" "You said you could play Red House better than me, so play it." "Just me?" Danny asked. "Just you," Jimi confirmed. "Show us what you got." The crowd was dead silent. Every eye was on Danny Morrison, this local guitarist who just challenged Jimi Hendrix to a battle. Danny started playing. And he was good. Actually good. He clearly knew the blues inside and out, knew the 12-bar structure like breathing, knew his pentatonic scales forwards and backwards. His fingers moved competently up and down the neck, hitting the right notes in the right places. He wasn't making mistakes. He wasn't fumbling. He was playing a solid professional blues solo that would have impressed audiences at most London clubs. He quoted some Clapton licks, threw in B.B. King-style bends, added rapid-fire runs showing technical skill. The guy could play. That was undeniable. But that was all it was. Solid, professional, competent, correct. It sounded like 1,000 other blues guitarists playing in 1,000 other clubs across London. It sounded like someone who'd learned guitar by copying Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck records note for note until he could reproduce them perfectly. It was technical proficiency without soul, notes without story, music without meaning. After about 2 minutes, Danny finished with a flourish, a rapid ascending run ending on a held high note, letting it ring out with vibrato. It was a textbook blues guitar finish, the kind you'd hear on a dozen albums. He looked at the crowd, expecting applause, expecting validation. A few people clapped politely. Most stayed silent, exchanging glances. Danny had proven he could play guitar competently, but he'd also proven, without meaning to, that he had absolutely no idea what he was up against. "That was good," Jimi said genuinely. "You can play. You know your blues." Danny relaxed slightly, thinking maybe he'd proven his point. "My turn?" Jimi asked. "Yeah, go ahead," Danny said, stepping back, still holding the Gibson. Jimi adjusted his Stratocaster, took a moment to tune one string that had gone slightly flat during the interruption, flexed his fingers, and then started playing the same song Danny had just played. But this wasn't the same song at all. Jimi started so slow, so quiet, that people in the back had to lean forward and hold their breath to hear. He played the opening riff, the same riff Danny had played, but with tiny variations, little ornamentations, subtle touches that made each repetition slightly different from the last. It was like the difference between someone reciting a poem and someone living it. The same words, completely different meaning. Then Jimi started bending notes, making the guitar talk in full sentences, not just playing blues licks copied from records, but telling an actual story. You could hear loneliness in those bent strings. You could hear pain, desire, longing, hope, despair, a full emotional journey happening in real time. The guitar wasn't making sounds. It was speaking a language that bypassed words entirely and went straight to the soul. Jimi closed his eyes, swaying with the music, his whole body connected to what his fingers were doing. His fingers seemed to barely touch the strings, yet the notes poured out like water, each one perfectly placed, perfectly weighted, perfectly felt. Where Danny had played the correct notes, Jimi played the necessary notes, the ones the song needed to exist, to breathe, to mean something. Then Jimi started doing things Danny couldn't process, playing rhythm and lead simultaneously, so it sounded like two guitars, using feedback as a musical element, making the amp scream at just the right moments, bending a string up, then down, then up again, creating sounds that shouldn't be physically possible. And then, just to make a point, Jimi swung the Stratocaster behind his head and kept playing. Perfect notes, complex runs, all while the guitar was behind his head and he couldn't even see the fretboard. The crowd exploded, screaming, shouting, applause. Danny Morrison stood on stage watching, his mouth literally hanging open. Jimi brought the guitar back to the front, played a final soaring solo that built and built until it felt like the ceiling of the club might lift off, and then ended on a perfect, sustained note that rang out for 10 seconds. Silence. Then the place went absolutely crazy. Jimi opened his eyes, looked at Danny, and smiled gently. "Blues is about feeling, man. You got the notes down, but you gotta find the feeling." Danny just stared at him. The arrogance was gone. The confidence was gone. He looked like someone who just realized how much he didn't know. "Want to try again?" Jimi asked, not mockingly, but genuinely offering. Danny shook his head slowly. "No, I don't think I can follow that." "Sure you can," Jimi said. "Just feel it. Don't think about the notes. Feel the song." Danny tried. He started playing again, but his hands were shaking. He made it through maybe 30 seconds before he stopped, overwhelmed. "I can't," he said quietly. "I thought I was good. I thought I knew guitar. But watching you, I don't know anything."
The crowd, which had been ready to laugh at Danny, went quiet. There was something genuine happening on stage, something real. Jimi put down his Stratocaster and walked over to Danny. He put his hand on Danny's shoulder. "You are good," Jimi said into the microphone so everyone could hear. "You can play. You know your instrument. But good isn't about how fast you play or how many scales you know. It's about why you play. What are you trying to say with the guitar?" Danny looked at him, tears actually forming in his eyes. I don't know. I never thought about it like that." "That's what you got to figure out," Jimi said. "The guitar is just a tool. What matters is what you use it to say." Then Jimi did something that stunned everyone in the club. He unplugged his Stratocaster and handed it to Danny. "Here, play something. Anything. But don't play what you think you should play. Play what you feel." Danny took the Stratocaster with shaking hands. Jimi's guitar, the guitar that had just created magic. He stood there for a moment, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to play," Danny admitted. "Then don't play anything fancy," Jimi said. "Play one note, but make it mean something." Danny positioned his fingers on the fretboard. He played a single note, just one, but he bent it, held it, let it ring out. It wasn't technically impressive, but there was something in it. Vulnerability, maybe, or honesty. "There," Jimi said, smiling. "That's more real than all those scales you played before. That one note had feeling." The crowd applauded. Not the wild explosion from earlier, but genuine, warm applause. They'd just witnessed something beautiful. Not a battle, but a teaching moment. Danny handed the Stratocaster back to Jimi, looking completely different from the cocky drunk who'd challenged him 10 minutes earlier. "Thank you," Danny said quietly. "Keep playing," Jimi told him. "But play from here," he pointed to his chest. "Not from here," he pointed to his head. Danny nodded, walked off stage, and disappeared into the crowd. Later, he'd tell people that night changed his entire approach to music. Eric Clapton, watching from the corner, would later say, "I've seen Jimi destroy guitarists before, but that night I saw him teach someone. That's harder than showing off. That's real mastery." The story of Danny Morrison's challenge spread through London's music scene immediately. By the next morning, every guitarist in the city had heard about it, often with exaggerated details. Some versions had Danny passing out on stage. Others had him throwing his guitar down and running from the club. But the musicians who'd actually been there told a different story, the true one. They talked about how Jimi could have humiliated Danny completely, but chose not to. How he could have shown off, made Danny look like a fool, turned it into a spectacle. Instead, he turned it into a teaching moment. A demonstration not just of superior skill,
but of superior character. Music shop owners reported a surge in guitar students the following week, all wanting to learn the right way to play blues. Guitar teachers found themselves fielding questions not about technique, but about feeling, about emotional expression, about what music means rather than just how to play it. Years later, in a 1969 interview, Jimi was asked about the incident. "Did you feel disrespected when that guy challenged you?" Jimi shook his head. "No, man. He was just a kid who loved guitar and thought he was good. And he was good. Technically, he could play. He needed to see there's levels to this. But more than that, he needed to understand that being the best technical player doesn't matter if you're not saying anything. I could have just embarrassed him and moved on. But what's the point of that? Better to show him what's possible. Help him see what he's missing. Maybe he goes home and thinks about what music really is. That's worth more than getting a laugh from the crowd." "Do you know what happened to Danny Morrison?" the interviewer asked. Jimi smiled, a genuine warmth in his expression. "I heard he's still playing. Sent me a letter once thanking me for that night. Said he stopped trying to be the fastest and started trying to be honest. Not trying to impress people anymore. Just trying to mean something when he plays. That's all anyone can do, really. That's all that matters in the end." "Did you write back?" the interviewer pressed.
Yeah, I wrote back. Told him to keep going, keep searching for that honest sound. Told him the journey never ends. You're always learning, always finding new ways to express what you feel. That's what makes music beautiful. It's never finished. The Bag O' Nails Club would host many legendary performances over the years. Paul McCartney met Linda Eastman there. Jimi played there dozens of times. But musicians who were there that March night in 1967 always said the same thing. The night Danny Morrison challenged Jimi was special, not because of the battle, but because of what happened after. In later years, Danny Morrison himself occasionally told the story, usually when teaching guitar to young students. "I thought I was good," he'd say. "I thought knowing scales and playing fast made me a guitarist. Then I challenged Jimi Hendrix, and he showed me the difference between playing guitar and being a musician. I've spent the last 50 years trying to close that gap. I'm still working on it." "Do you regret challenging him?" students would ask. "Regret it?" Danny would laugh. "That was the best thing I ever did. I was an arrogant drunk who thought he was hot stuff. Jimi could have destroyed me. Instead, he taught me. He gave me his guitar and told me to play one honest note. That one note taught me more than 10 years of practice had. The guitar battle that wasn't really a battle. The challenge that became a lesson. The heckler who became a student. That's the story they still tell in London clubs when young guitarists get too cocky, too confident in their technical abilities."
"You think you're good?" old musicians will say. "Let me tell you about Danny Morrison and Jimi Hendrix." Jimi Hendrix was mid-song when a local guitarist shouted a challenge. 5 minutes later, that guitarist was crying, holding Jimi's Stratocaster, learning that music isn't about notes, it's about truth. And that lesson, delivered with grace instead of cruelty, turned what could have been a humiliating moment into something legendary. If this story of teaching over ego moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Share this with someone who needs to understand that true mastery means lifting others up, not putting them down. Have you ever been humbled by witnessing real greatness? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like this video for more untold stories from music's greatest legends.